So, one of the things that I'm doing is looking at mystical experiences. And in particular, I'm interested in the role of the body in mystical experiences. And to help me do that, I've been studying two mystical texts. One is The Cloud of Unknowing, whose author is considered to be anonymous. We don't know who it is. We have suspicions, but we're not 100% certain who it is. And then the other mystical text that I'm working on is the Masnavi by Rumi. Okay, now just mentioning that in passing, but I really want to focus at the moment on the cloud of unknowing because, when we talk about God, and that's exactly it, we talk about God. We have our ideas about what God is or who God is. We have our ideas. And by definition, or you could argue by the impossibility of trying to define God, God is beyond all of our ideas and all of our definitions about God. So the cloud of unknowing says that if you want to know God, you have to put aside all your ideas about God, all your ideas about the world, all your ideas about yourself. Just, in fact, put aside all the things that you think you know. And he says, he describes it, he uses the metaphor of a cloud. And so he has two clouds. One is the cloud of forgetting. And so that is where we put aside all our notions, all our concepts, all our ideas, good or bad. And so we tend to think that, it's okay if we describe God in terms of positive words and descriptions. But he says, no, put even those aside and put aside all the things that you know of yourself. Put everything into the cloud of forgetting, because only then are you open enough, available enough to experience what lies beyond all our concepts and ideas. And that which lies beyond all our concepts and ideas, that is, and we wouldn't say it is God itself, but that is where we might experience that which we would give the name God to. Now, the cloud of unknowing, as I said, is a mystical text, and the mystics generally are considered to be those people who've had a direct experience of God. Now, what do we mean by a direct experience of God? I can use more words. So one of the words that we would frequently use in such a in such a description would be an unmediated experience of God, meaning that we are not going to experience God through our concepts or our ideas. We're not going to think that, for example, that God is love, and so love, we use that concept of love to give us an understanding of God. No, that's not how we're going to do it, because God is beyond all our labels, all our words, all our thoughts, all our ideas, all our concepts. I don't know who exactly said this. I wish I knew the author of this quote, but it says that As soon as you give a child a word for anything, it ceases to see the thing. That's a really useful thing to contemplate. You know, we have learned to see the world through our words, through our language. That's how we've learned to see the world, right? Today, if we look at something, you'll find that your mind immediately provides a word for it. You don't just look at the thing. You look at the thing as with a label, with a word. And words are symbols. So I think many of us are familiar with the quote. It's a Zen quote that the finger pointing at the moon is not the moon. Likewise, all our words are fingers pointing at that which we want to describe. That which we wish, that which we would be able to experience directly had it not been for the intermediacy of language. You know what I mean? So a child, before it's ever given any of these words, it actually experiences the thing directly. But as soon as it has been given a word, that's how it will see it, through the filter of that word. And so it no longer sees the thing directly. Now, does that mean that we cannot see things directly? Yes, absolutely we can. We can. But we must be prepared to put aside all our concepts. Does that mean we stop thinking? Now, I don't think that is something that we can spontaneously, or rather that we can deliberately or intentionally aim to do, because as you know, the moment we try to stop thinking, that's when our thinking becomes even more intense. Why? Because that's how the brain is wired. If I told you don't look in that direction, well, you're almost certain to look in that direction. Right? So likewise, I don't think it's useful to say stop thinking. And in fact, if you do practice meditation, it is not about stopping thought, but rather it is about being present. And there's a difference, because when you're trying to stop thought, you're so busy trying to do something like stopping thought. But when you're being present, all you're doing is to just allow yourself to be there, to be here, to be now, to be just there. And what tends to happen, so for example, one of the techniques that we use, foundational and fundamental techniques that we use in meditation practice, is to focus on the breath. Why do we do that? Well, for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is that when we focus on the breath and we learn how to do this, we learn how to pay attention to the breath without judging it, by just noticing it. You know, just as we might look at clouds in the sky, just notice them. And I know that when we look at clouds in the sky, almost immediately we start conjuring up ideas and thoughts about, oh, it looks like this, or it looks like that, oh, it's pretty heavy here, it's so very white there, or it's dark and grey and heavy over here, and it looks like it's going to rain. All that happens, right? The mind is so conditioned into this storytelling But it is possible to look at the clouds and just watch, like a baby would watch. And likewise with the breath, that's what we try to do. Simply watch the breath, or as they might sometimes describe it, ride the breath. Just be with it and ride with it. And what we notice is that when we do that, our thoughts automatically settle like mud in a glass of muddy water. They just automatically settle. So you see, instead of trying to stop our thoughts, what we do is we let them settle. And the more, now imagine this, a glass of muddy water, right? At first it's all murky and the mud's all dispersed throughout the water. Once you leave it to stand still, the mud settles, and what you find is clear liquid, clear water. Now, that's pretty much what happens when we focus on something like the breath and let all the thoughts settle, so that what you get now is that clear mind, which is unfiltered with our thoughts. How about that? That clear mind. Now, that is what some, more and more clear and experience of, let me try and say it properly, experiencing that clear water state. And the clearer it gets, and it does get clearer as our attention becomes so undispersed and undivided and so focused that, there's not even the slightest bit of a whiff of a thought floating around. It's just settled completely. So that clear mind that's totally unfiltered, not, as I said, not a scrap of a thought is filtering it anymore. That is what some might describe as an experience of unmediated reality. And that some people might refer to as God. Now, I don't want to get into trouble here, because I know I will, because people will think, oh, so you think that if you just sit down and let your thoughts settle, that you will encounter God. Well, I've got, let me see, two things to say about that. One is, by most definitions of God, there is no place or time where God is not. Right? There's no place or time where God is not. In other words, God is everywhere and every now, always present. So then, is God present now? Of course, there is nothing but God, and we are all the expressions of God, different expressions of God. So there is no time or place where God is not. Now, again, I'm going to, it's a bit, how shall I say it? I'm trying to talk about things that, would really need step-by-step scaffolding before we can even talk about it more sensibly. But anyway, just for the sake of this video, I'm just going to say that whilst I've just said that God is everywhere and every now, we have to understand that our perception of space and time is also another filter, right? Space and time are also filters through which we look at the world. And so to say that God is everywhere and always present, we're still speaking in the language of space-time. We're still speaking with that filter. And so, how would we speak it if there wasn't the filter of space and time? Well, we would say that God is. There is only now. There is only now. And that God is always. Or we might just say that God is. Or, as they say sometimes, I am. I'm sorry, folks, if all of this sounds a little bit complicated and maybe abstract. But I would encourage you to just, rather than try and make sense, try to intellectually make sense of what I'm saying, I would encourage you to just, allow all of this to just permeate your being, permeate your mind, your body, mind. And I think if you give it an honest go, in other words, you don't try and meddle with it intellectually, but just allow yourself to encounter it intuitively, I think you might find that whilst you might not be able to intellectually grasp it or even talk about it, you will have a sense that you'll have a sense of whether this feels right or not. Okay, that's all I want to say for now. Thank you for listening. If you liked what I had to share, do like, subscribe, share, and I would love to hear what you've got to say. Bye for now.